Caleb Dawson had always been a practical guy, but every now and then he made a decision that even he couldn't fully explain. Buying a cabin in the hills without seeing it first was one of those moments. The listing had been sparse, one blurry exterior photo, a short description, and a seller who claimed to be in a hurry to finalize things. Still, the price had been too good to ignore, and the place was only a short ride from his family's ranch. He imagined a quiet retreat, somewhere to rest after long days of work. But the second he pushed open the cabin door, he realized he should have asked a few more questions. A young woman was standing by the window, sunlight glowing through the dusty glass behind her. She spun around, startled, her hand instinctively moving to her backpack on the floor. Her dark hair was tied back messily, like she'd been working or hiking, and her boots were caked with dried mud. The cabin looked lived in, blankets folded neatly on the couch, a kettle on the stove, a stack of notebooks on the table. This wasn't a temporary trespass. Someone had been here for a while. Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious but steady. Caleb blinked, trying to figure out the right words. "I think I should be asking you that. I just bought this place." She stared at him as if he'd spoken another language. "Bought it? No, there must be some mistake. My name's Lily Harper. I've been staying here for 2 months. My uncle said I could use his cabin while he was away." Caleb's heart sank. The seller, Robert Kincaid, had never mentioned anyone else. "Your uncle owned this place?" "He still does," she said confidently. "Arthur Harper. He told me this cabin needed looking after." Caleb stepped inside fully, closing the door behind him. He'd expected a fixer-upper, maybe broken furniture, maybe animals nesting in the corners. He hadn't expected a person. And definitely not someone who looked like she had every reason to believe she belonged here. "There's a problem," Caleb said gently. "The man I bought this from wasn't named Arthur." Lily's face shifted from confusion to worry. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a worn envelope. "I have proof. He left me instructions." Caleb opened the letter carefully. The details were strangely accurate, too accurate to be coincidence. But none of it matched the paperwork Caleb had signed. As the two of them stood in the small wooden cabin, the truth hovered like dust in the air. Someone had lied, and neither of them knew who yet. Caleb pulled out the deed papers from his truck and set them on the rough wooden table, spreading them out so Lily could see every line. She sat across from him, fingers lightly tapping the edge of her uncle's letter. The two sets of documents couldn't have been more different. Different names, different dates, even different descriptions of the boundary lines. It felt like they were looking at two puzzle pieces from completely separate boxes. Lily's confusion only grew the more she read. She kept glancing at the signature on her letter, then at the signatures on Caleb's deed, as though willing them to match if she looked hard enough. "My uncle wouldn't lie to me," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "He told me this was his place to escape. He said it had been in the family for years." Caleb didn't want to push her, but something was off, and they both knew it. "I don't think you're lying," he said calmly, "and I don't think the documents you have are fake. But someone isn't telling the truth here, and it might not be either of us." Lily sighed, rubbing her forehead. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely shaken. "I don't get it. If your seller owned this place legally, why do I have letters from my uncle describing it in detail? He talked about the garden, the creek behind the cabin, and even that crooked fence post outside." Caleb nodded slowly. "Yeah, that part's weird. My seller mentioned nothing about a co-owner or any family ties. Just said he was retiring and wanted to be done with old property headaches." Before either of them could say more, a sharp thump echoed from outside the cabin walls. Lily jumped, and Caleb immediately stood, instinctively putting himself between her and the door. He eased it open and stepped onto the porch. The woods were quiet, too quiet, but the ground told a different story. Fresh tire tracks cut through the dirt, leading away from the trees as if someone had been parked there only moments earlier. Caleb crouched down, inspecting them. Lily appeared behind him, arms crossed against the chill. "Were those there before?" she asked. "No," Caleb said firmly. "Whoever was out here didn't want us to notice them." Lily swallowed hard. "Do you think they're connected to the mix-up?" "I think someone's keeping an eye on this place," Caleb replied. And until we figure out why, we shouldn't assume anything was an accident. The mystery around the cabin had just gotten a whole lot bigger. The air crisp enough to sting his lungs as he saddled his horse. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying the tire tracks outside the cabin again and again. Whoever had been watching them hadn't come close enough to speak, but close enough to listen, and that alone put him on edge. Lily had offered to come with him, but Caleb insisted she stay behind until he knew what they were dealing with. She agreed, though reluctantly, promising to keep searching through her uncle's letters and journals for any clue that might explain the strange ownership mess. The tracks were easy to follow at first, pressed neatly into the damp soil of the forest path. They wound between tall pines and patches of low brush, weaving in and out of old logging trails that hadn't been used in years. Caleb rode slowly, scanning the tree line, listening for the crunch of branches or the rustle of movement. The quiet was heavy, as if the woods themselves were waiting for something. After about an hour, the tracks curved sharply toward a clearing. There, half hidden behind a cluster of young firs, stood a weather-beaten shed Caleb had never noticed before. It leaned slightly to one side, paint peeling, roof sagging, like it had been forgotten by time. The tire marks ended right in front of it. Caleb dismounted, tying his horse to a low branch. He approached the shed cautiously, pushing the door open with the toe of his boot. It creaked loudly, dust swirling in the dim light. Inside, the space was nearly empty, except for a small metal lockbox sitting on a wooden crate. The box was old, its edges dented, but what caught Caleb's eye were the carved initials on the lid, A.H. He didn't open it there. Something told him this wasn't the place for that kind of discovery. He slid the box under his arm, closed the shed, and rode back to the cabin. Lily was waiting on the porch, her worry clear the moment she saw him. When he handed her the box, her breath caught. She traced the initials with her fingertips, her voice barely above a whisper. "These are my uncle's." They brought the lockbox inside and opened it together. Letters, maps, old documents, pieces of a story neither of them knew existed, spilled out across the table. As they read, the tangled history of the cabin slowly unraveled, revealing that Arthur Harper and Robert Kincaid had once co-owned the land, their partnership ending in an argument that neither had ever resolved. Lily looked up at Caleb, eyes full of questions and a hint of fear. "Someone didn't want us to find this." Caleb nodded, jaw set. "Then we need to figure out who and why before they come back."